We're now taking a look at the UK's approach to closing the gender gap in entrepreneurship. This takes nothing less than a national approach involving strong collaboration between the public and private sectors and leadership as exemplified by NatWest. The first of 8 recommendations in the Rose Review is the Investing in Women Code. Over 100 financial services providers in the UK have signed it, and in doing so have committed to reporting data on levels of financing to female entrepreneurs. Public reporting creates awareness and builds accountability, as we have seen with companies reporting on their gender pay gaps. The Rose Review's recommendations are expansive, and the code is but one lever. Orchestrating the ecosystem and backing recommendations with resources takes leadership. NatWest, like all Alliance members, walk the talk. We have codified the UK example into a case study so that others can learn. You can download it by clicking the link on your screen. Thank you.
We have, as mentioned, I'm Paul Jenkins. I'm a senior partner of McKinsey. I also have had the privilege of being a member of the Financial Alliance for Women board for a number of years. But I'm not the most important person here today. I'm going to be facilitating a discussion between Alison Rose, the CEO of NatWest, Robert van Zwack, who I hope will be joining. We're having some slight technical issues with Robert, but he's certainly waiting and ready. So assuming we solve those, then he will be joining ASAP. And then Stephanie van Vlieberg, who's an SVP at the IFC. So we are really looking forward to a great discussion. In order to set the scene, though, Ines mentioned some of the facts. I thought we'd start with some facts. So if we just get the one slide up, please. So why is it that this is so important? Why is it that we are having this conversation today? Well, this is just showing the facts for the UK. And what we see here is, if we start with, and it's showing the entrepreneurial journey. It's showing the journey that women and men go on from that initial intention to think about starting a business, through to actually starting up a business, sustaining the business. It's not trivial to just keep the business running, and then to scaling it. And by scaling, we mean a business that exceeds £1 million pounds or euro in turnover. And what we see here is just a dramatic difference. So for every 100 men, we get 2.5 scaled businesses. That's a business, again, that's really starting to make sort of serious revenues. For every 100 women, we only get half a scaled business. So we need 200 women just to get in the population, just to get one sort of scaled business. And I think it's striking to see where is it that we get those particular sort of drop-offs. We definitely get a drop-off at the intention sort of phase. So we for every 100 men, we get 14 who have an intention to start a business, and 11 that actually do so. We get 9 women with an intention, and only 6 that actually start. So already there at the startup phase, we've sort of halved the number that are created. Sustain is about the same. Women are as effective at sustaining businesses as men. The challenge is when you get into the scale up, where again we see a significant drop off. We sort of only 13% of female businesses actually scale versus 29% of men. Now, what I've just shown you is the data for the UK. We also have conducted the same research in multiple markets across the globe. If I was to show you the data for the Netherlands, Robert will probably talk about it. It's very much the same. The data for France, the data for Germany. In all of these markets, there is the same drop-off, the same lack of female-owned businesses, and the same lack of scale sort of businesses. What we, but it's one thing to look at it, but it's also important to make sure that we're able to do something about it, and that's where Alison, with her Rose Review, really led the ground in thinking about how to really go after the interventions that will make a huge difference. Looking first at the barriers, 3 main barriers: access to funding, home care responsibilities, and then networks and mentors. and then really thinking about specific interventions that would make a difference in all of those different areas, and leading the charge in making sure that those interventions came through. Now, the one we're going to focus on today is really related to access to funding and the introduction of the Investing in Women Code to make a difference there. But I'm sure our panelists will refer to some of the others because they're all equally important if we really want to make a difference and want to see a shift in this this funnel. But without further ado, enough from me. That's hopefully got you interested that this is something important to talk about. I think we should spin over to our panelists and hear a little bit from them about how they see the world and what they've been doing to make a difference. Maybe Alison, I can start with you. The Rose Review was an amazing collective effort by the UK financial service industry. It saw a lot of stakeholders sign on to the code. What was it that drew those stakeholders together, and why did they find this initiative so important?
Paul, and thanks for having me. I'm so delighted to be part of this debate and discussion. I mean, I think this really started from the aspect of the untapped opportunity. One of the things that as NatWest we found with the free accelerators we had up and down the UK was that we had 40% of attendees on those accelerators were women. But when I looked at the experience that women were facing, they really weren't getting the same access to the help and support that they needed. And so that really triggered the review that we did alongside the Treasury into really understanding what are the real barriers that women were facing, female entrepreneurs were facing when they were starting and scaling their business. And your funnel is a great example of that. And the reason it galvanized so much support and collaboration and cooperation was when you looked at the untapped potential that if women scaled and started businesses at the same rate as male entrepreneurs, up to £250 billion could be added to the UK economy. So at a time that we were talking about economic growth, about productivity, that potential is sitting there, and yet barriers are stopping women really having the same advantage. What we also saw that with a real entrepreneurial spirit and nature happening across the UK, and I know many other countries, we have over 1,100 new businesses were started in Britain every single day, but only 1 in 3 were women. So there's clearly a challenge right the way through the life cycle of entrepreneurship. So that really triggered the review, and you touched on some of the findings that we found that were the real barriers, funding being the predominant one. And funding in all its sources. Too often, because it was so difficult to get access to the right knowledge and insight and funding, we were finding too many women were starting their businesses, with family loans, credit cards, or coming to the banks for debt. And so getting very highly leveraged too early in their journey, or just not getting access to that capital. And then the really shocking statistic was only 1% of VC funding, which is so important at that startup point. Only 1% of VC funding was going to female-led businesses. So a very clear understanding of the barriers, but also a very clear demand and drive from female entrepreneurs to fix. And that 250 billion opportunity, I think, is a very galvanizing and sobering fact, as well as the lack of access or awareness to the funding that's available.
Wonderful, and clearly galvanizing. I think, can you say some more about the impact, Alison? What impact has the review in general, the code in specific, had on the sector, and indeed the provision of the funding to women?
Yeah, I mean, the impact of the review really, I think, highlighted in a very data-driven and factual way what the problems were, and that's galvanized. We made 8 sort of recommendations in terms of practical suggestions of what we need to do to remove the barriers. So yes, of course, childcare, family care were issues, but let's think about practical steps of putting female-friendly lending products in place so that you could accommodate the life cycle of an entrepreneur. But in particular, the code has been a really galvanizing factor, because what it's done is it's promoted transparency and highlighting where you go for help. So we now have over 100 signatories to the code. It provides really clear funding data. by gender, and also who are the providers of the financing. And what we've seen is that more money is going to female-led businesses. The number of loans that are going to female-led business from when we started the code, 9.5% up to 14%. At NatWest, we, for example, launched a dedicated fund for female-led businesses of £1 billion. That was fully drawn within about 8 months, and that's now increased to 2 billion. So it's really highlighted the problem, it's highlighted where to go for help, and it's also galvanized a code of practice as well into the VC and equity community to actually address the barriers and increase awareness of where to go. And then, of course, all the 8 different interventions, we've put practical steps in place. So a good, and tangible step that really makes a difference is relatable and accessible role models and local support. And I think that's really important. We've put in experts in residence in every single LEP, so in the local authorities around the country, which is a dedicated point of contact to offer help and advice and access to role models. And for example, we've seen a 25% increase in the number of female businesses coming to our bank in order to get help. So we can see that transparency is really highlighting things. You're seeing, VCs starting to work together. Money is moving. I wouldn't say the job is done, and I think the impact of COVID and the pandemic has really placed more of a burden on female-led businesses, and our results show that they're struggling even more. But what it does mean is that money is moving. The review and the transparency in the code means that people can actually see where they're going and track the actions are having an impact. And I think that outcome and transparency analysis is so critical.
We've got, Alison, 1,300 people listening in from hundreds of countries across the globe. They're probably all wondering, what does their funnel look like and how would they manage to make a difference in their markets? What advice would you give for people who are considering leading an initiative as you did?
So I would obviously wholeheartedly encourage you to do it, because I think if you go back to both the opportunity, the 250 billion I talked about just from the analysis that we've done, and we could see obviously different countries are able to do things differently. So UK, Canada, Australia were great examples where targeted, dedicated support actually makes a real difference. So I would absolutely encourage anyone who is focused on this to really embrace the findings of the report. They're very common challenges that we saw across the globe, and practical steps to remove the barriers. And it really does take public-private sector working together. And my call would absolutely be that those of us who can have an influence on removing barriers and taking them out of the way, we should, in service of helping entrepreneurs, because every economy needs a thriving entrepreneurial SME economy to really trigger growth. And so, there is all this untapped potential at a time when we are starting to get the economy moving again. Really practically reaching in and collaborating across this space is so important. I've wholeheartedly shared with all of my competitors in the UK market all of the things that we are doing to help entrepreneurs, female entrepreneurs, what's worked, what hasn't worked. It's a non-competitive sport, collaboration and intervention. The demand is there. We just need to put the supply in the right place and recognize that the journey and the pipeline for female entrepreneurs is different, and there are different barriers, but with practical steps you can intervene and help.
That's wonderful. Let's swing over. Robert, we're delighted that technology has succeeded in bringing you into the fold. ABN has always had a strong commitment to female entrepreneurs in the Netherlands. I just wonder, what do you see in? We've heard about the UK. What are you seeing in the Netherlands in terms of the barriers that they face, or even in terms of what does your funnel look like? What do you see?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. And I do apologize if I joined late. I'll just chalk it up to the security systems of the bank. But it was so great to hear Alison talk about the experience that she's had and initiated in large part. And speaking as someone who's had inclusiveness, who's had diversity as part of his DNA for all of my professional life, coming into a bank that has had inclusiveness and diversity as such an important part of who ABN AMRO, of what ABN AMRO actually is, it was very logical to assume that, yes, we did everything right also for our female entrepreneurs, just because we've been focusing so much on diversity and inclusion. And I have to say, Paul, in all honesty, as we started to dive into the topic, building on a session we've had with women entrepreneurs, and actually committed to some research before even signing up to codes, but actually getting the data. I did find some of the findings, or the initial findings, to be quite staggering, even for a country like the Netherlands. I'll just be very explicit about it. You know, we were finding that 1/3 of the women, as opposed to 80% of the men, experience a lack of support from banks. They do have ongoing issues with funding. There's still that lack of professional networks. So we would have thought, you know, we solved this networking issue quite a while ago. But the opposite actually is true, that you need to continue to focus. Another interesting statistic that came up through the research we're doing with McKinsey right now is that women continue to experience more issues in finding potential investors than men do. And of course, the question then becomes, well, why is that the case when we've been spending so much time thinking about diversity and actually working on diversity? And it still very much is, I think, about an unconscious bias that continues to creep into the relationships that we build. As a bank, you know, as we service our wealthy customers, why is it that there's a natural tendency to engage in the male part of the component as opposed to the female part of it? There is this behavior that we see time and time again that we think we're breaking, and yet we're not. That's really what statistics are showing us. Now, the good news, to Alison's point, is that there's a whole lot you can do about it. But I'd have to say, in all honesty, knowing what we've done as a bank around the diversity angle, and then really focusing on female entrepreneurs, and then getting into the statistics, I found they're actually quite surprising. And it's recommitted what we are now doing as a bank for our women entrepreneurs.
You say there's quite a lot you can do about it. Could you say something about some of the solutions that you may be considering?
Well, considering and starting to put in place, of course, we're not even halfway or nearly as close as to where Alison is. And I hope a year from now, as we are just a new joiner really in the Alliance. So thank you. And also I should say thank you very much for having a newbie like us with you on the show today. But certainly there's a couple of things that we're now talking about. We're thinking about dedicating relationship managers to our client relationships. It is about, and I know it sounds basic, but it is about retraining and training continuously about what it actually means to deal with an unconscious bias as you serve your clients. It is very much about making our products and services inclusive. So actually reviewing the total product suite that we have and begin to think through what is the access actually like. We're also working very closely with female entrepreneurs now, trying to understand better how they access, I think, Alison, you were raising that point, how they actually access the funding and how they actually get to the VCs, but how do they get to us? What are the networks that we seem to be accepting and think these are the acceptable networks that we're all using? Well, how much of a female component is there actually in there? And then once you begin to talk to the female entrepreneurs, they actually tell you, yes, they will have their own networks, but how closely aligned are they with the more impactful networks that we may be interacting with? So it is understanding the vitality of networks. Then it is very much about identifying role model behavior. We all know that's true, but if you don't know who your role models are, even within a female entrepreneurial environment, it is still very difficult to establish those linkages. So that is something we continue to do every single day. And then very much triggered by Alison's experience as well, it is about starting to think through what type of funding can you actually make available to highlight the specific nature of female entrepreneurs. I know there's, in the Netherlands, there's, for example, a number of female venture capital, women venture capital that have just begun to invest in women-only initiatives. It's something that we as a bank ought to be extremely close to because the upside is huge. I think our queen put it very nicely, when she said, you know, this is not just about women, it is about doing good business. And I think it's having to combine these two that we still have quite a ways to go, but I'm fully committed to continue to execute against that.
That is fantastic. And I love the quote from your queen. Couldn't agree more.
She was very explicit.
I just wonder then, as you think about as you look at the solutions, what do you think about the potential for a code, or indeed other sort of cross-sector-led approaches to address the problem of the like that Alison was talking about?
Yeah, I'm a firm believer in codes, and the code, and I think that's where Alison's got to. I think in the UK, it is that cross-sectoral approach that you need to take into this. This is certainly from a financial institution. I've already started talking to my peers in the Netherlands, where I know they're sharing that same ambition. And what I'm actually now trying to do is further the conversation a bit more to ensure that when and if you do apply a code, that it has the right reach, that it has the right participation, and that it is in. There's a danger in codification, particularly in the Dutch side, where people say, well, yeah, I included the signature, and I'm participating. That's not what we're looking for. So I think there's absolutely logic to a code, provided that you do get that wide reach across, I think, as Alison has been able to have it across the UK. So I certainly am a supporter of it. I've started the conversations already with my peer banks. As a matter of fact, tomorrow we'll have another conversation about this. And then, of course, it involves involving other sectors and getting some kind of political buy-in to all of this, because I do think that's also crucial.
Super.
But it shouldn't stop anyone from acting on it today. So I'm not going to sit here and say we're going to wait for a code to act, because I do think that's the wrong way around.
Yeah. That's great to hear. Thank you, Robert. We'll come back in a few minutes, but first of all, Stephanie, we've heard about the Netherlands, we've heard about the UK. IFC, of course, is about emerging markets. Do you see emerging markets facing the same challenges as the UK and Netherlands when it comes to female entrepreneurs, and also the data associated with it? And if you do, what do you think the IFC partners and clients can take away from the experience from the UK in particular with the investing in women code?
First, I really want to congratulate warmly Alison, NatWest, and the UK government. The Rose Review really was a splendid piece of work, and the fact that most of the information came voluntarily, to me, is super encouraging. It's good for women, but it's also good for the UK economy overall, which I think is how Alison started. And in IFC, we have been deeply committed to disaggregated gender-based data for many years, and have been pushing our own clients to see how far we can go. I can assure you that in the 100+ countries in which we operate, there are massive data gaps. Very few clients actually gather data on women-owned and women-led businesses as a vertical. And yet we know that there are fact patterns when we do that. In fact, our own data tells us that, as an example, women are less likely to default, and NPLs are lower for women-led portfolios versus men-led portfolios. And I would also say that in the audience today, we have a number of successful clients that are members of the Alliance. I think they might tell you two things. First, they would tell you that aggregating sex disaggregated data around volumes of lending to women is neither easy nor inexpensive. The majority of the information systems don't actually give them the ability to capture the data adequately. And more importantly, in many legal jurisdictions, disclosing that information, there are many legal barriers to being able to do that. But I think the other thing that they would tell you is that data is just one piece of the puzzle. And there's a broader piece of the puzzle, which is the analytics piece of the data itself, which actually helps you inform business making decisions. And I think it may be the more important piece of the puzzle. So in Africa, we recently in 13 countries did a survey of financial institutions. And for those that actually grab sex disaggregated data and can tell us what volumes they lend to women, only 14% of them were using that information to make informed business decisions. To me, and I think the IFC, that's a huge lost opportunity, because one of the things that we've learned from all of our banking on women work is that you need to understand your clients, and women-led businesses do have specific needs that are outside of those of men. So designing the right products and services for that group creates good business, but you got to be able to analyze the data. And, you know, maybe I'll just end this because Allison mentioned PE and venture capital. And I know I've been talking mainly about banks, but we did a really interesting study with Rock Creek. And we looked at just a little under 1,000 PE firms in emerging markets, largest study that's ever been done. And what we found was that PE firms that had gender balanced management and decision-making teams were able to outperform their peers by somewhere between 10 and 20%. So again, it's just an indication that when you put gender at the heart of what you do, you perform better.
That's a fascinating additional insight, and not surprising, but it's great to have it evidenced. Thank you very much, Stephanie. We've been talking quite a lot about how you can bring multiple participants together. It is an ecosystem that you need to influence. I just wonder, maybe going back to you, Alison. Why is that ecosystem approach so important if you really want to create the right environment for female entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I mean, the ecosystem is vital. I mean, most levels of research, even when you look at them globally, entrepreneurs will say the biggest reason that they don't start a business is not knowing where to get help or fear of failure. And therefore, wrapping an ecosystem around so that you can put all those support measures in place is really vital, because the entrepreneurial journey from idea to startup to seed to scale to launch, you need different levels of support and help as you go through that. And we see far too many businesses fail where the founders reach a certain point and don't know how to scale and what the implications are, or how to trade, or all of those different elements. So I think that when you look at the barriers that face female entrepreneurs in particular, putting an ecosystem around you where you create an environment that supports and help is accessible at the right point in their journey, whether that is financial advice in terms of how to write a business plan and think about your cash flow rather than your product, your access to market and how you're going to launch and brand it, to the digital and data tech that you need, or just basic employment and where to find skills. You can access that through the support, and there is a lot of support out there. That's kind of one of the frustrating things. There are grants and support, there is lots of advice, but if you're starting a business, just if you look at it from a business owner's perspective and an entrepreneur, accessing it is, you don't have the time to search for all of these different things. You don't necessarily have the right networks to give you the route in. So the ecosystem makes a difference. And certainly our experience through our entrepreneur accelerators, when you have got that support and actually advice to help become investable and scalable, then that has a disproportionate impact for female-led entrepreneurs, because they can get that help and support. So I think that sort of collaboration, public-private, really means not only are you getting help in the right way, you're building a sustainable funding and financing platform for them. So the point at which they need VC funding or product development funding or bank funding at the right point in their cycle can be done to create sustainable and scalable businesses.
And Robert, if we turn to the Netherlands, how do you see the power of ecosystems and collaboration?
Yeah, just listening to what Alison was saying, and having worked in so many different ecosystems over the last many years, whether it's Silicon Valley, whether it's Eindhoven here in the Netherlands, whether it's London, whether it's Singapore, we know the value of ecosystems. And I think it's everything that Alison has just mentioned. And what I'm seeing actually in the Netherlands is that very natural tendency to work within ecosystems, but maybe not so natural tendency to actually look back at the ecosystem and define how it's constituted. Who are the participants in these ecosystems, and are they indeed reflective of the environment in which you live? And we'll find that there's an overrepresentation of men in these, generally still in these ecosystems. So that tells you something. So when you apply that by default to an ecosystem for female entrepreneurs, everything we've seen over the last few years around how effective ecosystems are with respect to guiding the entrepreneur from the very outset to all the way to IPOs in and if necessary, it is very important to continuously ask yourself the question, how inclusive is that ecosystem? And is it indeed a representation of the environment in which we live? And once you begin to ask yourself that question, that then can lead you in all kinds of other conversations. I think we're just beginning to tap into, particularly if you're related to female entrepreneurs, how valuable it is, how valuable the ecosystems are, but are they accessible? And therefore, can they be used in the same way that you'd expect men to use them? So I think there's a lot of work being done on that, but I think we need to do a heck of a lot more to ensure that we get to that equitable participation in the relevant ecosystems.
And finally, Stephanie, how do you see this?
I think a lot's been said about the ecosystem, all of which I fully agree with. To me, the ecosystem needs to have a bit of a push and a little bit of a pull. So first, I think we need, at least in our countries of operations, policy and regulators to think about better disclosure. Because if we can push them in that direction, you'll get what you measure. Second, we do need to help financial institutions and our own clients use the analytics to create the products that will help serve women. Again, their needs are slightly different than male-led businesses. And I do think we can create whole business lines by helping our clients think about what are those products. Third, we've talked a lot about advisory services, but women-led businesses, actually all entrepreneurs, need help with marketing, finance, insurance, equity. So creating those kind of incubators is important. And then finally, I think Allison touched on this lightly, but ensuring that within that ecosystem, things like childcare and family care are available. And here, we haven't talked much about it, but this is where I'm really encouraged about the use of technology, online platforms, and companies that can be built around that, because I do think what we've seen as a result of the COVID crisis is that is an avenue that allows women the flexibility from a time perspective and from a location perspective to build really interesting businesses. And I would end by saying, the COVID crisis has set gender equality back by as much as 25 years. It has never been more imperative to push as hard as we can on financial inclusion so that we come out of the crisis and try to build back better.
I could not agree more. It's a great summary of both some of the opportunities that are posed by digital and online, but also the challenge of the setback. Maybe just returning to the code for a minute, or returning to the collaboration. Alison, I probably asked the question that many people out there are wondering: how did you manage to get all these competing players to come together? I know the UK market. It's not that people naturally come together to collaborate on something. What's the secret? How did you do it?
Paul, are you saying that we're just not natural collaborators here? Well, look, I think a couple of things really. Firstly, I think when you look at the economic imperative to change and the opportunity, that's a very galvanizing aspect. And I think because we did the report in a very data-led way, and then obviously we interviewed, thousands and thousands of female entrepreneurs and male entrepreneurs, and built a very clear data set and then a very strong economic case. I think the opportunity was very stark. So I think that meant there was goodwill and that people were really keen to help unlock that opportunity. And I think on the collaboration point, as I said, I was very open in sharing with all of my competitors all the things that worked and didn't work. I mean, Robert, you touched on, some of the things you're doing around your relationship managers. We have dedicated female relationship managers who are qualified, and just signposting that for female entrepreneurs. They have the choice of whoever they want to work with, but that made a really significant difference. So we just shared everything, and I made it very clear this was non-competitive team sport, and actually, the benefit of everybody getting involved and behind this would not only help drive more sustainable and stronger business, it would be a business opportunity for the public and private sector as well. So that, and I phoned a lot of people. So there was a lot of calling and phoning and gentle nudging and maybe not so gentle nudging, and all of those elements. But I think, demonstrating a clear business case, a clear opportunity and demand, and the fact that this was for good business purposes, and then encouraging people to sign on, and sharing what we've done helped everyone get to the right place.
It clearly did. But I think it's now time to move on. We've got three additional speakers who are going to share very shortly their perspective on the code and the Rose Review. Do we have yeah? So we have and we really are sort of touring the globe. So we have Carolyn McCann from Westpac. We have Nadeem from BLC. We have Ulrika from AXA. Maybe we can cue the pre-records.
Hi everyone, I'm Carolyn McCann, a Group Executive of Customer and Corporate Relations at Westpac Banking Corporations, which is one of Australia's largest banks. And as a bank, we have a long and proud history of helping women in business. An interesting fact that is 34% of small businesses in Australia are led by women, and 70% of them are family run. So we recognise the importance of women as one of the key decision makers in businesses starting up and scaling up. But we're also aware that there's several problems with women starting up and scaling up business. One is access to capital and funding. The second is access to supportive networks. And the third is just general confidence to get started in the first place. So we're looking into all of our practices to determine, is there anything in the way we're running our business that doesn't work for women? For example, we've looked into our own data from a gender perspective on credit decisioning. And we know there's absolutely no difference in the decisions we make from a credit perspective when it comes to women. However, we also know that men apply for credit 1.6 times more often. So our immediate challenge is to make sure that women know at Westpac we're open for business to support them. And we really want to build their confidence in approaching us and getting started with our bankers and understanding the many digital processes we have to help. We nurture supportive networks, both online and through our business bankers. And we also try and build female confidence in business through our program, Ruby Connection. Ruby Connection is an online community that aims to provide engaging, inspirational stories and helpful information at all stages of the business journey. We believe there's a lot more we can do, and we've looked at what the UK's done, because there's a lot we can learn so that we can get better for supporting women in business.
We forgive Caroline for not joining us, given it's 1 a.m. in Sydney right now. Then we're going to pivot to Nadeem Kassar from BLC Bank.
Ladies and gentlemen, BLC Bank has been a leader in supporting women entrepreneurs in Lebanon through the WE initiative, a focused program that was launched in 2012, addressing the banking needs of female entrepreneurs. In parallel with the WE initiative, BLC supports distinguished female entrepreneurs through the Brilliant Lebanese Award, BLA, a yearly event that aims at identifying and rewarding female businesses that stands out through excellence and innovation. Furthermore, BLC has created a panel of non-financial services that supports the women entrepreneurial ecosystem, aiming at providing proper training to women entrepreneurs in areas that need special expertise, such as accounting, people management, information technology, and so on. It's worth mentioning that one of the lessons that we are learning from the Lebanese economic crisis is the remarkable resilience of women-led enterprises who did not leave the country despite all difficulties, compared to higher percentage of men-led businesses that relocated abroad. This is why we do endorse the approach that the UK has taken, and that is driven by NatWest, an alliance member supporting women. And we do believe that this cross-sectorial approach is an important step as it entices many players at the national level, which is far better than being a single bank isolated effort. Thank you, everyone, and please stay safe.
And finally, pivoting away from banking, insurance. We're going to hear from Ulrika.
We live in an innovation-driven economy where entrepreneurs are leading the way. For women, the road is not easy, and they face many barriers, from access to finance, to having the right networks, and the upskilling support, as we can see through the Rose Review in the UK. At AXA, since 2016, we have been working at developing specific offers to help women entrepreneurs overcome some of these barriers. In addition, we are building a strong ecosystem of partners to enhance the support we can provide to women entrepreneurs. More recently, with our asset management business unit, AXA Investment Managers, we have initiated and co-chaired the 30% Club France Investor Group to promote better gender diversity within the SBF's 120s executive management teams. This is really building on the successful track record of the 30% Investor Club in the UK. The group, AXA in particular, aims to collaborate and engage with the community of investors around gender diversity, as well as generating open discussions with the SBF 120 companies and support them in this important transition, with the aim of reaching 30% at least women in those executive management teams by 2025. All these actions are really driven by our strong commitment to gender diversity, gender equality, and women empowerment, as well as by our company purpose, act for human progress by protecting what matters. Thank you very much.
That's wonderful input from across the globe. I think before we close, we do very quickly round our three wonderful panel members. You know, we've heard so much about what you have done. I just wonder, looking forward, what are the key next steps? In traditional order, Alison, what's the next steps for NatWest?
Thank you. Well, I think we have to recognise that the job's not done and we need to maintain momentum. And Stephanie made the very good point that the pandemic has had a disproportionate impact on women and compounded some of the challenges that we're facing. So I think for me, it is about focusing on breaking down those barriers, ensuring support is in place, and making sure that we don't take a step backwards. We know that it has disproportionately affected more women. So now is the time to lean in, go faster and do more.
Fantastic. Lean in, go faster, do more. Robert, what about yourself and ABN in the Netherlands?
And I'm going to keep that very short. It's continue to build on the momentum both at ABN AMRO and across the Netherlands.
Fantastic momentum we're building. And then finally, Stephanie.
I got to unmute myself. There we go. I actually want to make sure that we're inculcating gender in all that we do. So I recently made an organizational change and brought our gender team into operations. And so we're going to focus in three areas. One is, what are we going to do for ourselves in terms of the way we're managing our own business? So setting KPIs for all of my managers and directors around gender equality at hiring and to ensure that we have inclusion going forward. Second, on our corporate scorecard, ensuring that we are setting targets to push our business in the right direction. And that includes things like ensuring that 50% of our board seats are held by women and that we're increasing the volume of money that we're lent to women-owned companies every single year. And then finally, we need to expand our work with both governments and private sector clients to ensure they too are building the right ecosystems that we've all been discussing so that we can see gender-led businesses come out of this crisis stronger.
Hey, fantastic. I mean, what a great discussion. I think we've all learned a lot around what can be done, but we've also learned a lot about the imperative to do it now. I'd just like to say a huge thank you for the panelists, for Alison, for Robert, for Stephanie. You know, obviously, if we were live, there'd be a huge round of applause. I'm not sure we'll manage that, but just a big thank you for me on behalf of the 1,300 that have been able to listen to this. So thank you all, and I think we hand back to Carol. But thanks for a great discussion.